Welcome to the MudRoom, everyone. This is our weekly free and live Uncommon Sense parenting class. How is everyone this evening? Happy October! Today's been a day, y'all. I'm already into the wine. Fair warning. Everything was going okay until about 4 p.m. when my oldest got home from school, and then things went sideways very fast. My youngest had fallen asleep in the basement, and then my oldest woke him up, and then the little one had an accident, and we had to get ready to go to swimming, and everyone was going red-brained, and it wasn't good. But they did well at swimming, and everyone is fed and in bed, and I'm calming my nerves with a little bit of fresh Moscato, and I'm rocking my plaid because it's officially fall. Okay, so tonight we are talking about the Clumps, not the overweight family from the Eddie Murphy movies. I realized after I kind of thought I was getting clever with the name of this one that's what it is, isn't it? It's a family from those awful Eddie Murphy movies. Anyways, we're not talking about them. First, though, let me introduce myself. My name is Allana Robinson, and I am a parenting effectiveness coach. I help parents of toddlers and preschoolers understand why their children are misbehaving and how to fix it without yelling, shaming, or using timeouts. So, clearly, I spend a lot of my time every week talking with parents, whether it's in the parenting posse, in my inner circle client exclusive group, on coaching calls, in person, whatever. I am always talking with other parents and helping them do 3 things: find root issues, make priorities, and make plans. That is my workflow. What's the problem? What are your priorities? Where did those 2 things cross over? Okay, now let's make a plan to address those, to fix it. And one thing that everyone seems to have a really difficult time with is what Dr. Green calls de-clumping. Parents tend to have a really difficult time. Everybody tends to have a really difficult time, but parents in particular seem to have a really difficult time separating out different problems. They tend to look at their child's challenging behavior in multiple different settings in relation to multiple different activities at multiple different times of day and equate it to one centralized source. I think because on the surface, the behavior all looks the same. Y'all have heard me use the metaphor of a boiling pot of water and how the bubbles are the symptoms, but the source is that the burner hasn't been turned off. So parents tend to see bubbles. They just see the symptoms, and they assume that all the bubbles are because of one giant burner. When in reality, it's that your child has multiple smaller pots on multiple burners, and even though all you can see is bubbles and all the bubbles look the same, it doesn't mean that they're all related, that they all have the same burner. Does that make sense? So typically what happens is a parent will start telling me about how their child, throws sand at the park anytime a strange child comes near them. And I'll start asking questions about that, and then suddenly they'll say something like, and then at my mom's house last week, he kicked his brother in the shin when, he sat beside him at the dinner table, and at the doctor's office, he wouldn't sit on the examination bed, and then when I was trying to order a Starbucks this morning, he was yelling over me for a cake pop, and I'm like, whoa. Hold the phone. We were talking about him throwing sand at the park. How did we end up with him yelling for a cake pop at Starbucks? And they'll be like, well, it's just all the different ways that he's misbehaved in the last week. Or, it's examples of how he just doesn't listen. And we've talked about how defiance and listening and all that are a conglomeration of 8 different executive functioning skills in the past. So we're not going to go into that right now. If you want to hear about that, you can go back in the videos or on the Uncommon Sense blog or on the MudRoom podcast and listen to that. What I want to talk about right now is de-clumping the issues that you want to work on. Because even if they all look super similar on the surface, I guarantee you that the stress that's driving the behavior at the doctor's office, for instance, is not the same stress that is driving the behavior at the park. They're both stress, and they both look like stress, just like two bubbles look the same. But just because two bubbles look the same doesn't mean that they are the same bubble, right? Just because two instances of stress look the same does not mean that they're the same stress. They might be related, but they are not the same. And this tendency isn't just isolated, as I said, to parents, not by a long shot. I find teachers are really guilty of this too. She won't stand in line or sit in her chair or listen in the gym or eat all her lunch or pay attention while outside. And don't get me wrong, those are all problems. They all individually merit their own attention. I'm just saying that they aren't all the same problem. Couples tend to do this too, I find, where, you didn't do the dishes and you didn't show up on time and you didn't ask me if it was okay if you went out with your buddies that night and you made a bunch of noise, while you were playing your drums. And these are all examples of how you disrespect me, right? Those are each individual issues. We need to de-clump. We need to separate out the problems that we are then going to make individualized priorities for and individualized plans for. Because what happens when we clump is that, one, we're much more likely to forget about someone's strengths, particularly a child's strengths in this example, but anyone's strengths. Because when you sew together all the various difficulties that they're having throughout their day into one all-encompassing problem, it seems then like they're never successful at doing anything. And I can guarantee you that that is not true. That's when we start hearing language like bad kid. Yes, this child might be having difficulties, but that doesn't mean that they're inherently a bad person. They're just struggling. And two, when we clump things all together, we tend to make very generalized plans that focus on those bubbles, on the symptoms, right? Going back to our boiling pot metaphor. We start metaphorically pouring cold water into the pots, but then we're shocked when days or weeks later the pots start to boil again, right? The plan might deal with a few specific behavioral symptoms that we're seeing, but because we're clumping all the problems together into one, there's no hope in hell of actually addressing them all, because even if they look the same, they are not the same. They aren't being driven by the same thing. So next time that you're trying to solve a behavioral problem, stop and think, how many ways can I divide this up? Like if you had a really bad park visit. Okay, so the park is the clump, right? The park visit as a whole is the clump. But your child throwing sand at the park is a different problem than your child pushing kids down the slide at the park. Them running off when you call their name is another different problem. Them screaming and kicking and crying when you leave is another separate problem. So while it was one bad park visit, there are at least 4 separate actual problems to look at and to make plans for within that clump of the park. And I promise you, if you can start to do this, if you can start even just try making a list, right? I need to address the sand throwing. I need to address the bolting. I need to address the pushing. I need to address the difficulty leaving. Okay, so now we've declumped. And then apply what I talk about in the 2 questions episode. Ask yourself those 2 questions for each line item. And then you're going to start seeing a plan emerge, right? This is called backwards design, where we figure out what we want the outcome to be, and we work backwards from that to solve the problem. And this is what we do in Parentability. So if you're struggling to fill in those gaps, to flesh out that plan, then that's where you need to be, because I can hold your hand and walk you through each and every one of those steps. I also have my misbehavior proof class, which can help you figure out the what don't they know how to do bit. And that class is totally free, and the links for both of those are in the description box. So what do you think? Can you think of a time where you've clumped issues together and it's caused you to create a very general solution that didn't actually work? Do you think declumping is something that you can apply? Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you're having difficulty coming up with or figuring out how to declump a specific issue, and I'll see if I can help you break it up into smaller specific issues to make plans for. All right. Thanks for being here with me this evening, everyone. I'll see you again next week for another Uncommon Sense Parenting class. Have a good evening. Bye.